Welcome to Podcast, the Business of Dentistry podcast, brought to you by Practice Plan. Podcast delivers the best business advice, real-life stories, and practical hints and tips to make your practice a more profitable and sustainable business. And now, here's your host.
Hello, welcome to Podcast. I'm Hazel Dockery from Practice Plan, and with me today are Shah and Hannah Burrows of Kiroku. So, would you like to just explain a bit more about Kiroku and what you do with it, please? So, should we go to you first, Jay?
Yeah, sure. So maybe to start with, I'll introduce myself. So I'm one of the co-founders along with Hannah. And before Kiroku, my background's in computer science and AI. So I studied AI for about a year at the University of Cambridge, studied with some of the best professors, and then I wanted to take that research and build something out of it. So about 7 years ago now, I met Hannah. We're quite fortunate to meet someone who had identified a big problem in her space, which is dentistry. And from that, Kiroku was born. So I learned all about the field of dentistry, about how every single dentist hates taking notes. And we thought we'd apply some of the things that I learned within AI to solve that problem. And that's kind of how Kiroku was born.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Jay. And what about you, Hannah?
I'm Hannah. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having us. And I am a dentist by training, so graduated about 10 years ago from the University of Bristol, and went into several different clinical roles in hospitals, practice, and public health, and really enjoyed being a dentist. But just again, couldn't believe how much time was spent writing notes in this kind of stressful environment that was created from trying to write all this information down, but also trying to provide good dentistry. And so that led me to kind of explore whether technology could be applied. Luckily, met Jay, and he's already kind of given you the origin story of Kiroku.
Yeah, well, it does sound like it was a really fortunate meeting for both of you. So, and it's also hopefully going to benefit us and anybody listening to us today. So, let's get back to basics. How would you define AI? We know it's here, there, and everywhere, but how do you define it?
I think the way I always like to think about it is when a machine is trying to accomplish a task that requires usually some form of human intelligence. I think now with ChatGPT, everybody thinks that's AI, but I think AI is actually much more simpler than that. What ChatGPT is trying to do is, something generative, something that's more generic and it can apply to multiple use cases. But I think the AI that we're all used to, and people probably don't realize it's AI, is just a single task that it can do that usually you do require a human to do. So the most simplest form is playing a game against a computer, and that computer is an AI. It could be Google Maps, trying to navigate your way around somewhere. I think it's almost everything we use now has AI in some form or another. That's kind of the way I would define it.
Is it Wordle as well?
Potentially.
Wordle. Yeah.
I love Wordle. I've been doing it for about 2 years straight. So, but there's a good chance that it probably picks the words for every day that you have to use. I can't imagine there's somebody in the background picking a word each day.
No, I can't either. Yeah, but yeah, I suppose you're right. It sort of does get into every bit of our lives now, really, without us realizing. So people get a bit sort of carried away with iRobot type scenarios and that kind of thing. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about AI, do you think?
I think that's a big one. I think I think the movie industry probably hasn't done AI justice for what it is. Everyone's used to iRobot or the Terminator, like the big avenging AI that's going to be evil and take over the world. I'd probably say that's one of the biggest things until I'd say maybe this year actually, or last 2024, when I think OpenAI with their ChatGPT has really shown the world what AI can do for good, potentially for bad as well. But I think there's been a bit of a tipping point where until this moment, when you mention AI, people think, oh yeah, some machine taking over humans. That's probably the biggest misconception, because obviously this is a field that I've been in for a really long time. And when I tell people to do AI, they're like, oh, you're the one who's going to take over our jobs. So no, that's not what I'm trying to build here. Yeah, probably. Hannah, would you say anything else there?
No, I think the biggest misconception is kind of number one. I think sometimes anything that's automation is kind of often referred to as AI. So I think actually just like the line between what is AI, I think that's requires some knowledge from kind of us all generally as it's getting integrated into our lives about what actually is that, and then also the ways in which it's going to develop. I totally agree. I think anything in kind of films over the last sort of 20 years has been quite scary, and I don't think
Mm.
that is necessarily reflected, although perhaps does kind of make us a little bit concerned about how these things are regulated, which is something that we should be thinking about. But yeah, I think it's more kind of the definition of what actually is AI.
Yeah. So I mean, this moves us nicely onto sort of like what the subject of the podcast is. What do you think the ethical challenges are around AI at the moment?
So I
Um,
think, Jay, you go first, and then I'll answer
Sure.
from a dental perspective.
Yeah. So from more of a general perspective, I think there's like three things that I've always thought about, which are the ethical concerns. So bias and discrimination, I guess that's one or two, and maybe misinformation. Um, AI is trained off data of millions of people and what they've put on the internet and so on, right? Um, and with that, it uses that data to make its own logical conclusions and decisions. And with that, there's naturally some bias and there's some discrimination. I think there needs to be a lot of work put in to make sure that doesn't happen and to make
Yeah.
sure it works fairly. The other big thing that we've seen is just misinformation. I think, as in a very, very simple example of maybe not a catastrophic outcome, but yesterday I was making some pizza dough. It gave me the wrong quantities of how much water to put in, and it just turned out to be mush. But that's like a really, really simple example of how misinformation can happen. But that's, you can see obviously that wasn't catastrophic. It didn't affect anybody other than my pizza. But you can imagine that being much, much worse when you're using that data to then make further decisions. So I think
And
misinformation.
I think that's actually the perfect segue into what I think is so crucial when you're considering any application of AI within clinical practice, which is it is a tool to help the clinician. It doesn't replace the decision making of the clinician, and that is like that for me summarizes how we should respond to all of the different ethical kind of concerns around including AI. Because as Jay said, there's bias, all of these different things, but ultimately we as the clinician are going to be the one that's responsible, and therefore I think clinical review and taking that very, very seriously is absolutely essential, and never kind of taking the output of AI as the right answer. It's the dough might be wrong, the dough recipe might be wrong, and therefore I need to review this before I implement it. And so I think for me that summarizes how we should be thinking about this as clinicians. And I think also as AI companies, I think it's something that me and Jay spend quite a lot of time thinking about, because we need to design a product that makes it as easy as possible to facilitate the clinician to be able to do those reviews. Never kind of give the misconception that whatever our system outputs is automatically correct. Here is an AI suggestion, please review it. And how can we then design the product to enable that for the clinician? I hope that kind of answers the question. I think it's gone a bit off beast, but
No, it does actually, because sort of like it speaks to the ethical considerations that companies should have in mind when they're implementing AI as well, isn't it? I mean, it's like, do not take this as gospel. It is purely a tool, and it can make your life easier, but it shouldn't take over. There's still
exactly.
need for oversight. I mean, is that a fair comment, do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, I think it does become like really our responsibility to, because you can design a product that draws to attention the things that require review, that enables that behavior, or you could not consider that. And I think that is something that we should be taking very seriously as a company. But again, I always repeat it to clinicians kind of thinking about implementing AI, whether that's Kiroku or whether that's a different company or technology entirely. You need to think about how you are reviewing this to ensure that you agree with the output before you're doing anything with it that's patient facing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair comment. I mean, with AI, it relies very heavily on data, doesn't it? I mean, it sort of learns from that kind of thing. So how can practices ensure that their data practices are secure and responsible? Because you're dealing with very sensitive information, really, aren't you?
Absolutely. And really that is also another ethical consideration of AI. The data is going to be part of it. So you need to, as a clinician introducing this, you really need to understand what the security and data handling um, rules are around the company. You know, let's say if you're going to introduce Kiroku, what do Kiroku do to make sure that data is safe? How do we treat our data? But making sure that you are actually looking into that.
Mm.
And then things to consider again is kind of how that data is shared, how it is stored, and also you know, have you gone past a very easy kind of, you know, because we don't expect every clinician to be a data expert, but there are loads of badges, I suppose, that can give you peace of mind that this company is taking security seriously. You know, GDPR is one. In the
Mm.
US, HIPAA is one that really shows, you know, there's different things that you could look into that even if you don't know a huge amount about data and security and encryption and all of those things, that you can take confidence that the company's taking it seriously and someone else has assessed this.
Yeah. I mean, I assume, Jay, that you actually do as much as you can to ensure that things are responsible, but should it be a partnership between the company and the customer as far as
Yeah,
data security is concerned?
I think so. I think the first responsibility lies on the company. Like
Mm.
as Kiroki, we have to do everything in our power to make sure that the data, any sensitive data is safe, or any data at all really is as safe as possible. We're very transparent with everybody on where the data is going. I think that's a must, but obviously companies aren't perfect and humans aren't perfect, so there may be some things that fall through the cracks. And
Mm.
ultimately, if you're a clinician using any service on the web, it is your responsibility to make sure that the data you're providing is secure. The place I would start, any new system using any sensitive data you're passing out, and that could be as simple as sending an email with, the patient's data in it, or using Google Docs, for example, to write your notes or anything like that. You want to just check the company website, see what they do with the data, see if that data is being retrained. I think that's a big one with AI right now, where
Mm.
there's a lot of companies, and you have to often opt out of using the system using your data to retrain itself. Um, I think that's quite a big one. So I think, yeah, you're right. I think there is a kind of it's a two-way street. The clinician needs to check, but also the companies needs to be held responsible as well.
Yeah, yeah. And just a nice little one to finish it. What AI technologies or advancements are you most excited about? Shall I come to you first, Jay?
It's quite a broad one. I think the rate that it's moving, it's almost past my imagination of how good it's going to become very quickly. The thing I like I'm enjoying right now is not just the AI advancing, but what people are building off that. So one example for me is in the past I can use ChatGPT to write code for me, but I could never see what that code is until I bring it to another system. But something that one of my friends has recently released is the ability to click a button and then suddenly a website appears based off that code. And that's just a very, very small example, but you can kind of see like as more and more creators and developers are building things on top of AI, it just means you can do even more.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do the same thing with Kiroku. We're bringing AI into lots and lots of different parts of our system just to make it that much better.
I mean, that's just blown my mind. So what about you, Hannah? What are you looking forward to?
I
What's
think actually
exciting you at the moment?
my answer is actually very similar to Jay's. I think just right now it feels like with everything that's going on with generative AI, we're kind of limited by the applications purely by our imagination on how to use it. And I think humans are very imaginative creatures. So I think the rate at which these things are going to develop and you start to see different things that can be done with this existing technology that's already been built and how those things can get weaved together, I think is going to be like transformative. I don't think we can predict what the end of this year is going to look like. And that is a little bit scary, but it's also very, very exciting because I think it really is going to affect how a lot of us work. You know, so much of what we do I mean, I personally, when I write my to-do list for the week now, I run past, okay, which things can just get ChatGPT involved in. And so it just helps like increase the efficiency of so many things I'm doing. That's one example, very simple example as well. But I think it's going to move at a rate that we can't really imagine. I think it's currently only limited by our imagination and how we can apply it. And so that excites me.
Well, yeah, the whole thing sounds incredibly exciting. So I'm sure we'll be having you back sometime to talk about the latest developments that you've got anyway. But for the moment, thank you both very much. Jay, Hannah, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot.